Crime, morality, justice. What exactly defines a criminal act? Is it as simple as breaking the law, or does it go deeper into the realm of ethics, intent, and philosophy? Today, we're tackling one of the most famous and debated questions posed by Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. Did Raskolnikov, the protagonist, truly commit a crime? On the surface, this seems like an obvious question. He murdered two people, but Dostoevsky challenges to look beyond the clear-cut legal definitions and explore the philosophical, psychological, and societal implications of Raskolnikov's act. We'll break this down from multiple angles, looking at how Raskolnikov himself views his action, how society might view him, and what it all says about justice, morality, and human nature. Let's start with Raskolnikov's perspective. In his mind, the murder of the old pawnbroker isn't just a crime, it's an act of heroism, an attempt to elevate himself above the common man and achieve greatness, the Übermensch, as Nietzsche said. But why does he think this way? Raskolnikov is obsessed with the idea of extraordinary men. These are people who, throughout history, have committed acts that others might see as immoral or brutal, but they are celebrated for it because they challenge the world. To change the world. Take Napoleon, for example. He's responsible for the death of thousands, but he's also regarded as a military genius, a hero of France, someone who helped reshape Europe. For Raskolnikov, this type of person is a hero, someone who transcends the moral codes of the average person because their goals are greater. But here's the thing, Raskolnikov is not Napoleon. He's a poor, isolated student living in 19th century St. Petersburg. He feels powerless, constantly struggling with poverty, despair, and the feeling that life is passing him by. So when he murders the pawnbroker, he doesn't do it just for money or out of anger. He does it to prove that he is not just an insignificant, ordinary person, that he is a Napoleon. He wants to prove himself that he can be like those extraordinary men. Raskolnikov justifies this murder by convincing himself that the old pawnbroker is a loose, a parasite who makes the world worse by exploiting the poor. In his mind, killing her will not only benefit society, but also give him the power to break free from societal rules and become the kind of man he desires and admires. But here's where the cracks in his thinking starts to show. After the murder, he's immediately overcome with guilt and paranoia. Instead of feeling like a hero, he feels the weight of his conscience, and his life quickly spirals into psychological torment. He starts to question his entire rationale. Now let's take a step back. Raskolnikov's action raised an important philosophical question that lies in the heart of Crime and Punishment. Can crime ever be justified if it serves a greater good to the society? In the novel, Raskolnikov's theory is based on utilitarian principles. He believes that the death of one worthless person, the pawnbroker, could lead to a better life for many others. This is similar to the philosophy of Jeremy Bentham, who argued that the moral action is the one that leads to the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. So, if Raskolnikov kills one person but the act benefits many others, does that make him moral? From a legal standpoint, the answer is no. Murder is murder. But from a philosophical standpoint, Dostoevsky challenges to explore this idea further. Could there ever be cases where an individual is justified in breaking the law of a perceived greater good? This idea of moral relativism, where morality is not absolute but depends on the circumstance, is something we still grapple with today. Think about debates over civil disobedience, war, or even certain corrupt practices. When does breaking the rules for a higher cause become acceptable? Or does it ever? Raskolnikov believes he can justify his crime in these terms, but his psychological breakdown shows that it's not simple. Even if he tries to rationalize it, his conscience won't let him escape the guilt, and he's constantly reminded of the crime he committed. But when Raskolnikov's inner turmoil is fascinating, we also need to consider how society defends crime and justice. What role does the community play in determining right from wrong? From society's perspective, crime is defined by laws, clear, objective rules that help maintain order. Without these laws, we'll be left with chaos. In Raskolnikov's case, he has committed murder, and society will categorize him that as a criminal act, regardless of his motives. The law doesn't care about whether you think you're a hero or not. But Dostoevsky uses Raskolnikov's story to question how rigid these laws should be. While we need laws to maintain order, what happens when those laws fail to address deeper moral or societal issues? The pawnbroker, after all, represents a kind of systematic exploitation, taking advantage of the poor in a society that often overlooks them. Raskolnikov's murder is an extreme reaction to that system, but it forces us to ask, what should society do about people like the pawnbroker? Interestingly, Dostoevsky contrasts Raskolnikov's cold rationalization with Sonia, who represents pure compassion and selflessness. She doesn't rationalize her suffering or her choices the way Raskolnikov does. Instead, she simply lives her life with humility and empathy for others. Sonia serves as a foil to Raskolnikov, showing a different path, one where morality is based on love and sacrifice, rather than intellectualized theories about who deserves to live or death. Raskolnikov's justification for his crime is rooted in the idea that morality is subjective, that extraordinary people can transcend normal rules. But where does this kind of thinking lead? If everyone starts believing they can break the law for their own reasons, society quickly breaks down. Dostoevsky understood this danger well. Moral relativism, the idea that what's wrong, right or wrong, can change depending on your perspective, leads to a breakdown of shared values. Without a common moral framework, we live in a world where anyone can justify anything, and that's a recipe for disaster. This kind of thinking has been used throughout history to justify aristocracy, where people or governments stop believing that they're above the law or that their goals justify meaning, and the results can be catastrophic. Raskolnikov's story shows us the personal consequence of such thinking. He wanted to believe he was an extraordinary man, but he was still human, and he couldn't deal with the guilt feeling in his mind, bound by the same moral rules as everyone else. In the end, he couldn't escape the weight of his conscience, or the judgment of society. He couldn't even solve his own problems. So, did Raskolnikov commit a crime? Absolutely. Legally, he broke the law by committing murder. But Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment asks us to think much deeper than that. It explores the complexities of morality, the dangers of trying to justify crime, and the tension between personal beliefs and society rules. And that love can cure everything. In the end, Crime and Punishment reminds us that no one, no matter how extraordinary they believe themselves to be, can escape the consequences of their action. Raskolnikov thought he could transcend the law, but the psychological, moral, and societal forces at play brought him to his knees. His story is a powerful, cautionary tale about the limits of rationalization and the inescapable reality of justice. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Crime and Punishment and want to explore more questions of moral, justice, and philosophy in literature, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think? Can crime ever be justified in the pursuit of a higher cause? Or is murder always wrong, no matter the circumstance? Let's discuss it in the comment. Thank you for watching. See you next time.